So good evening, everybody. How are we all?
Fine, thank you.
Very, very good. Good. And I can see the man of the moment is waiting in the wings somewhere. As you're all here, what I'm going to let you know is that we are actually going live on YouTube as well. So good evening to anyone that is joining us now. Just a little bit of housekeeping for everybody. You may have seen. So good evening, everybody. How are we all?
Fine, thank you.
Very, very good. Good. And I can see the man of the moment is waiting in the wings somewhere. Sorry about that. There was a little technical hitch there. I've got David here who's going to be administering for everybody for the evening. So yeah, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you could just remain muted until you put your emoji hand up to ask a question. And then once we've done that, you can finish your question and then take your emoji hand down so we don't see hands and people asking questions twice. The session will be recorded and it will run for approximately 90 minutes. And so then what we're going to do for the benefit of people that are watching the replay of this is we'll do what I call a mock goodbye. So basically we'll thank Con for his time. We'll all say goodbye. I'll stop the recording and then there'll be 10 minutes for us to have a little chat off the recording. So you please feel free to remain behind afterwards. I'm just going to check the time. We're 3 minutes to go and then we will start as soon as 8 o'clock reaches us. So there we go. We've got a lot of new faces on here and good evening, Ram. How are you? Good. Hello. And so there we are. I'll tell you what, I think I'm going to kick off now actually because we can get more in. So if you can just bear with me, I'm going to start the recording and we will bring the gentleman on himself, the man of the moment. So without further ado, here we go. So good evening and welcome. Thank you very much indeed to everybody for attending this evening. And without further ado, I'd just like to say a very, very big thank you to the wonderful Con O'Neill. Thank you so much for coming on, Con. If you'd like to unmute yourself, please. Yeah, if you just unmute yourself, Con, thank you. Ah, he's disappeared. You've switched your camera off, so you need to switch your camera back on again. And the bottom at the left, you'll see it says mute. If you can press that as well, and it should unmute you. The problem with these live things, there's always a... Aha, right, can you unmute yourself?
Aha!
We have sound. I thought we were going to have to do sign language for you or something. Good evening, Mr. O'Neill, and how are you?
I'm okay, how are you?
I'm fine, yes, good. So how have you been looking after yourself during this dreadful time that we've all been going through? What have you been up to?
I've been okay. I've been, I live in London, so I've been based in London really, but I've been, I've managed to do a couple of little jobs. Acting wise and some radio stuff and some, I'm recording a vampire radio or podcast for Mank Made, and I've been busy and I've come up. My mum is up in Wigan, so I've been travelling up to see her whenever lockdown is allowed. I'm up there at the moment, which is why I have this beautiful chintzy house behind me. It's my mother's house.
looks
So,
looks lovely. Very, very
yes.
traditional. That's great. Well, look, first of all, you know, I'm so grateful for you for coming on like this. And I mean, with a CV like yours, you know, the big question is, where do we begin? Well, in the words of Maria von Trapp, let's start at the very beginning, shall we?
Oh, straight in with Maria von Trapp quote.
Well,
Love
there you
it.
go. You see, why not? I mean, come on, you know. Okay, look. So you were born in 1966. People know how old you are now. They can see it on Wikipedia in Weston-super-Mare. Now, I think for a lot of people, including myself, people automatically associate you and think that you're a Liverpudlian, which of course is not the case. When did you first sort of move up to that area, having worked?
Very early on. I was a baby when we came to. I came up to Holland, which is equal difference between Liverpool and Manchester. But I was brought up in Holland when I got there. I was about 1.
Right.
And Holland is adjacent to Skelmersdale, which is a very Liverpudlian town.
Yeah.
It's kind of Scouse and Wigan were the two accents I grew up listening to, my mum and dad being Irish.
Yeah.
So there was quite a cacophony of accents going around the house constantly.
Yeah.
And yeah, so my Liverpool connections from very, very early on.
Yes. So if you were to go back down to Weston-super-Mare, do you think you'd probably drop back into the accent again? Is that, you know?
No, John, because I was 1 when I left Weston-super-Mare.
Yeah, but you don't know, you see,
so
because you're a chameleon.
I might be able to cry in a Western-super-Marian accent,
well,
or wail,
it's
or
worth
fart. But I don't think I spoke much at 1.
Well, you never know. Anyway, look, I mean, there's so many different things that I'd love to talk about, and obviously we've only got so much time. But what I'd like to kick off with, I've got here, is that you started your career at the Liverpool Everyman Youth Theatre.
Yeah, that's not strictly true. That story came about without my involvement. What happened was I was doing the usual youth theatre thing in Wigan and Orrell and Holland, and one Sunday we went down to the infamous Liverpool Everyman Youth Theatre to do like a kind of co-production day with them, and that was my first connection with the Everyman Theatre that then gave me my first job a few years later.
Right.
The Everyman Youth Theatre, I was never really a part of it. This was the David Morrissey, Ian Hart, Vic Maguire era of the youth theatre. I would have given my left bollock to have been allowed to do the Everyman Youth Theatre, but it just was not within my geographical reach at the time.
Right.
With buses not being as good, because I'm so old, it was horse and carts in those days, but it took me it would have taken me an hour and a half to get to Liverpool with public transport in those days. So yes, that's a little bit of it. I think that came about by an eager press person saying, "Oh, he was associated." I would have loved to have been, but it's not strictly true.
Yeah. Right. So then, what was your first kind of I won't say dipping toe in the water? After that, what did you?
National Youth Theatre, mate. I had a kind of this experience with drama in my school. My school was not particularly proactive. I did have one great drama teacher called Kath.
Right.
Kath Warren, I think her name was, and she was quite inspirational. I had a teacher all about teachers, mate, at the end of the day. I had a teacher in my junior school called Bernard Stapleton, who he directed little plays. We were, 6, 7, 8, and 9, but he enthused you. He made you excited to be doing plays. It was a great way of playing and focusing, and so Bernard and Kath were great. But I remember when I said to my careers teacher in the school I went to in Orrell that I wanted to be an actor, she just looked down at her page and paused, and then looked up and rolled her eyes and said, are you sure you don't want to join the army? So, you know, there wasn't even an attempt to help or to show the way. And fucker, 8 years later, I won the Olivier Award, so I had the last
Absolutely.
laugh. But
You
at the
said,
end of the day,
yeah.
I was brought up in a community at that time wasn't particularly open to the idea of having a creative job, and I understand that.
Mm,
But still, to give students no help whatsoever is just unforgivable.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I heard about the National Youth Theatre,
Right.
and
Right.
I wrote to the National Youth Theatre, and I got an audition. And this was the day. This is when Michael Croft, God love him, who had originated it, was still running it and taking the auditions. And I had an audition. I was 15 years old. My voice was very, very high, and I had a very distinct Wigan accent.
Yeah.
And I always, when I do lectures at drama colleges now, and I talk about always choosing a piece, if you have to do pieces, choosing a piece that you could possibly play at some point, and so that you can, you know, you can attach yourself emotionally and spiritually to it. However, I was 15 and I did Shylock from Merchant of Venice, and
Yeah.
I did a speech from Springport Wine from a character
Yeah.
called Rafe, who was in his 60s. James Mason had played it in the movie.
Yeah,
So I was playing two ancient men in
mm.
my speeches, and I always remember Michael sat there with a bag of crisps throughout my audition, and could not have shown less interest in what I was doing. But he gave me a place, and it changed my life. Didn't teach me how to act. National Youth Theatre doesn't. It's not a drama school as such, but it allowed me as a 15-year-old northern lad to go down to London for 2 weeks and spend time with other 15, 16-year-old kids who wanted to be actors, most of whom were from communities that didn't really embrace that idea. So for me at that age, to be around like-minded people was life-changing for me. It became a possibility.
Yeah.
So thank you, Michael.
Yeah. Did you find at that age, I'm going to get this right, did it kind of make you grow up quicker in a sense, or did you kind of just sort of feel your way through with things, you know, because you hear of teenagers that go into the business and you really have to, because you're going into an adult.
No, I didn't grow up. I still haven't.
Good.
I don't know many actors who have.
Well, very true. Very true.
It's the thing that keeps us young is the fact that, you know, what we do at the fundamental bottom line is put on a frock and pretend to be someone else.
Absolutely. We're children, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to just mention, I've noticed here you did something at a theatre of my hometown, the Hull Truck Theatre.
Yeah. Wojciech.
What was, okay, when was
Wojciech? Wojciech was a big old fib from John Godber. I was in Australia. I'll just drop that because it sounds so cool. I was in Australia filming, and I got a phone call from my agent saying that John Godber wanted to direct me in Wojciech. And Wojciech, for those of you who don't know, is an extraordinary play by George Bushner about a man's descent into madness. And it's I think there's about 14 characters, 13 men, 1 woman.
Yeah.
And the woman is the love of his life, who he's so obsessed with, he eventually kills her. And I don't believe when John asked me to do it on the phone in Australia, he mentioned that there was a through casting policy at Hull Truck, and instead of it being 13 men and 1 woman, it's going to be me and 4 women in this version of Wojciech. And I only really knew that when I walked into the read through.
Yeah.
And the concept that John had in his head was, because I was so obsessed, Wojciech is so obsessed with Marie, that his concept to have 4 actresses was that he saw Marie in everyone.
Right.
But none of the actresses looked at all alike. So it didn't really work. And it was one of those, I enjoyed some of it and I hated some of it, but I will never forget, I had a little flat in Hull, and I came home one night and somebody had thrown a fridge through the window.
Oh my goodness!
That's my lasting memory of the Hull Truck.
I haven't been back to Hull for a lot of years, but trust me,
it was a good fridge as well. So I'm not quite sure what that was about. But everyone's a fucking critic, aren't they, John? at the end
Oh,
of the day.
God, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on. If I miss anything out, please pull me back on it. But I've got a few highlights here. Southwark Fair at the National under Nicholas Heitner.
Yeah, that was my first play after Telstar. I'd worked with Nick before. I'd done a magnificent, some called it awful, production of a Mark Ravenhill play called Mother Clap's Molly House.
Right.
And which was Mary Whitehouse tried to have it banned. It was that rude. And it was my first time at the National, and it was an extraordinary experience. And then Nick asked me to do Southwark Fair, which was it introduced me to Maggie Tyzak, who became a lifelong friend, God love her.
Yeah.
And it also introduced me. The character in that he was on stage a lot, but he had very little to do. And then he had this stonking like monologue, this like 5-page monologue that in which he completely disintegrates in. But it's funny. But it's only funny if the actor or if the performance plays it absolutely for the truth.
Right.
And I only realized it was funny when we started to play it to an audience.
Right.
I had no idea it was funny in rehearsals, because he is literally he's very, very drunk when the speech happens, and he's literally disintegrates in front of the entire audience.
Right.
And loses everything in a breath. You know, he goes off stage and tries to kill himself. And but when the audience started to laugh, the empowerment of that, because I knew what we were doing was absolutely cemented in truth. And the fact that it was like when I did Blood Brothers. When I first started doing Blood Brothers, there's a line at the very end of Blood Brothers where Mickey, when he has a gun to Eddie's head, and Miss Johnson comes on stage and she tells him that they're twin brothers, and Mickey has the line in which he says, "Why didn't you give me away, Mum?"
Yeah.
And it's a heartbreaking line to deliver, and it used to always destroy me in rehearsals. And then we went on the first night in Hornchurch, and it got a laugh. And then it got a laugh the second night, and the third night, the fourth night, and it got a laugh nearly every single night. And they used to really fuck me off. And then halfway through, a mate of mine came to see it, and we were just talking about it in the pub, and he said the release that the audience felt on that line, because they suddenly see the wit of Mickey back. Not that he's being funny, but he's just being absolutely honest. And the first thing he thinks about is, why didn't you give me away? And the audience laugh is something that they go, oh, because they recognize him again, and they, for that briefest moment,
because the tension builds so much in that scene, doesn't it? At the very end.
That's a genius of Willie Russell. You know, it's pointless saying Willie's a highly underrated writer, because he isn't. He's very rated all over the world. But as an actor who's done a lot of his stuff, he will always be underrated to me, because when you do Willie Russell, it's like you've got gold in your mouth, and when you do your work prior to going on stage, you can just sit back and let it unravel in front of an audience, and it just spins. It's like surfing a wave when you're doing one of Willie's things. And
so backtracking just slightly, a tribute to the Blues Brothers at the Whitehall Theatre. Would you like to tell us a little bit about how that
tribute to the Blues Brothers? When I left Blood Brothers, there was a guy who ran a pub in Brighton called the Hare and Hounds, and he'd been asking myself and Warwick Evans, who played the narrator, if we'd do a gig, basically, because he was a big fan of Blood Brothers. And I don't like singing as myself. Give me a character to hide behind, I'll sing till the cows come home. But just me with a microphone terrifies me. So Warwick and I agreed to do it on the premise that we'd get some mates and we'd dress everyone up as the Blues Brothers band, and we'd just do some songs from the Blues Brothers. So we did that, and this is an absolute true story. We did that on a very snowy night in Brighton, just one night. We didn't think anyone would come because it literally was snowbound. And David Pugh, a friend of mine who's a theatre producer, came along to see it. And we were very, very drunk by the end of it. And just jokingly, we and David were talking about to get it on the West End. About 3 days later, he called me up and he said Hampstead Theatre had agreed to do a benefit night, and would we do the Blues Brothers show there? You know. So we went, yeah, okay, and then from that, David thought you might be able to get some interest, and maybe we might produce it at some point. The day after the Hampstead Theatre gig, the benefit night, we got offered 4 London theatres, and we picked one, and it was the Trafalgar Studios, which is now it was Whitehall, which is now the Trafalgar Studios.
Yeah.
And then we had 8 weeks before we went into rehearsal, and we didn't have a script. We didn't have an idea. All we had was 15 songs. And we knew we couldn't do the Blues Brothers per se because we didn't have the rights to the movie.
Yeah.
So David and I, I swear to God, this is a true story. David and I rented a cottage in Wales, and we went down there and we wrote the book to tribute to the Blues Brothers. There was a big tree at the end of the garden. It's when mobile phones were this big. And we would write a scene, very drunk. We would go down to the bottom of the garden. One of us would climb the tree. We took it in turns. We called the lawyer, because that's the only place you could get the signal on top of the tree. And we would tell them what we were writing, and we'd say the scene over the phone, and they would say, yeah, that's fine. And then we'd come back, and that's how we got the show written, and then we put it together. And then 12 weeks after the benefit, we opened in the West End. And then there was an incredible night. Our advance was next to nothing, and John McCarthy, the guy who was being held hostage, David's sister's a nurse and my sister is a nurse, and John McCarthy's girlfriend or sister was a nurse, and she'd started a charity for John McCarthy, which was a yellow ribbon. And we decided to do one of our previews was a benefit night. And by some bizarre reason, the night of the benefit, we'd already done 2 or 3 previews. And I got a phone call at 7 o'clock in the morning from LBC saying, do you want to talk to us about John McCarthy? You're live. And I'm lying in bed going, I don't know what you're talking about. And John McCarthy had been released. So the day of our benefit, John McCarthy was released. None of the papers or press could get hold of McCarthy because he was in transit.
Right.
So they all converged on the Whitehall Theatre. And that night, our preview was on every single news programme. David got hundreds and thousands of balloons, yellow balloons dropped. Our box office next day went through the roof. That's how we got our advance and our notice.
And how long did you run for?
I was in it for 9 months. I left, it ran for another 9 months, and then it toured for about 15 years.
Oh my goodness. It's amazing. So moving on swiftly, because we've got a lot to get through, obviously your film and television. So I'm really sorry, I'm going to move on. I've got here something that I didn't see this, and I wish to goodness I had, and that was your portrayal of Joe Meek in Telstar.
Yeah. Nick Moran, who's a friend of mine, who's a quite famous, well-known film actor, he had written this play about Joe Meek before Nick got Lockstock, so before Nick was famous. And the first read-through of this play had me as Joe Meek, Jude Law was Hines, Patrick Pink was played by Hans Matheson, Kathy Burke was Mrs. Shenton, Sam Morton was dating Hans at the time, so she was making tea. Lee Ross was in it. It was just this. Nobody. It was before Jude became hugely famous, but it took 10 years to get that play produced.
Wow.
And then we did it in the West End, and again, it was it was a play about a man nobody knew, being played by a man very few people knew.
Right.
And we got great reviews, and I got nominated for an Olivier and blah, 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 but we couldn't get audiences until the last 2 or 3 weeks, and then we sold out. And we ran the allotted 6 months or 3 months, I can't remember what it was. And I was so exhausted by the end of it, I literally had to take 6 months off, because it's a true story about a man who was this extraordinary record producer. He recorded everyone in his front room in his flat in the Holloway Road. But he was bipolar, and he was an amphetamine addict, and he was gay, and he was a devil worshipper. So a lot to get in. And he also, Telstar, the song that he wrote and produced himself, was the biggest selling instrumental song of all time. And he died penniless, and he killed himself and murdered his landlady. So it was a tragic story, but Nick wrote a beautiful script, and it's very funny. And then 2 years after that, we made the movie with myself and James Corden and Tom Burke and Kevin Spacey. And I would never go back to it because it was too difficult emotionally for me.
Yes, yes.
But extraordinary. We must do something on Blood Brothers, though, because they will lynch you if you don't.
Say that again. Sorry, I missed.
We must talk about Blood Brothers because you will be lynched if we don't.
Least
of all by my family.
Right, we're going to go back then. So back to Blood Brothers. Tell us exactly how that all started, because I would love to know as well, as I'm sure.
Okay, so there's many stories about this, and I've read these in the papers. How I got the part Blood Brothers. The Bill Kenwright saw me ripping Ticket to the Empire or blah blah blah. What happened was I auditioned like everyone else. I did know that Bill was an Evertonian, so I wore an Everton top. I remember that. And I went into the Duke of York's theatre and I sang Sunday Afternoon.
Yeah.
I didn't get asked to read. Bill called me down into the auditorium and we sat and we had a chat. And then 3 weeks later, I was offered the part. So he'd never seen me act, and he offered me Mickey purely on the rendition of Sunday Afternoon.
Yeah, yeah.
And I will be eternally thankful to him for that opportunity, because I didn't really go to drama school. So my training was 2.5 years playing that role.
Yeah.
Night after night after night after night. And Mickey is, first of all, I honestly believe Blood Brothers is possibly one of the greatest, if not the greatest musical ever. It's certainly, when I saw it when I was a kid, just blew my head off. And Mickey is sort of like the Hamlet of musical theatre characters. And I learnt so much. And when I left after a year and having been lucky enough to win the Olivier, it changed my life. And then I went back 5 years later and we went to Broadway with it, which was in my drinking days. So I can't remember a lot of it, but apparently I had a great time.
Right. I was going to say, how was it received over there? I mean, in comparison to the British audience.
Oh, difficult, because, you know, Blood Brothers is about class. Most of Willie's plays are about class. And the Americans don't really identify class. And so quite a lot of it, we used to get an amazing response from the audience. Like, I've never done Blood Brothers without a standing ovation, but we didn't think we'd get that in America. And if anything, the standing ovations were more intense than they were in the UK. Right. But, you know, I remember the opening night, the press night, and the reviews not being very good and everyone kind of getting quite upset. But when we opened in London, the reviews weren't very good.
Really?
Yeah, and it ran for 27 years or something.
Yes.
It was Jack Tinker. Our dailies, the Standard thought it was crap. A lot of the normal reviewers, you know, the dailies didn't like it. Jack Tinker, who used to write for the Mail, loved it, and it was Jack. It was that. I think it was our production of Blood Brothers that Jack wrote. If you have to steal an usher's uniform to get in, do it.
Yes.
And then the Sundays were good, but the first reviews weren't good. And the same happened in New York. And then I left and David Cassidy took over from me and Sean Cassidy took over from the fantastic Mark Hutchinson.
Yes.
And I think Petula Clark took over from Stephanie. Because we all were, it was in those days where you couldn't do a long run if you were British on Broadway. So we were only allowed to do, I think, 6 months or 5 months or something.
Yeah.
So the Cassidys, took over. God love them. And now there's a Scouse accent that you all should listen to. And yes, and then I came back. And Bill asked me to go back and close it a few years ago. And you know what? I was in my late 40s then, and I didn't want to be a man of that age playing a 7-year-old boy, because my 7-year-old Mickey was all about energy. It was all about high energy, as kids are. And I just couldn't have done that a few years ago.
Right.
So I would have had to compromise, and I just didn't want to. I rarely go back and do things again. I think I've only done twice in my life on it.
Yeah.
I really.
It's. I think that show. I mean, it's literally. I mean, there's such an emotional roller coaster, isn't it? From the very beginning with the prologue of what's happened, and if you, I think even if you haven't seen the show, it to me, I mean, now it sends a shiver down my spine. You see the two. I don't want to, no spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen it, but you know what I'm talking about at the beginning, and it builds and it builds and it builds, and it's just that very last scene with Mrs. Johnston, and of course that line,
But again, it's Willie's writing, mate. He makes an audience fall in love. The idea of having adults playing kids, it's not new, but it's a real device that before an audience knows it, they've seen an actor grow up from 7 to 14. They don't realize that that's what's happening, but that's what's happening.
Yes.
He's giving them something that they're going to grieve. He's giving them characters, 3 characters, Linda, Mickey, and Eddie, who they will grieve, and that's why you heard the gasps at the end, and that's when you hear. I cannot remember another time where I've sat in an audience and heard people sob.
Yeah,
you would hear people sobbing in Blood Brothers, mostly men. So not many writers can do that.
No. I mean, it's just amazing, and it's just I think it's the strings before "Tell Me It's Not True" start, and it just then that song just builds and builds and builds.
Yeah, it's anthemic, and he's clever. It's a clever set that, but it's also, he earns it. Everything he does, he earns.
Yeah.
And it was a privilege to be in that show because it was almost perfect theatre.
Yeah. I've got to say this before we move on, Con, but seriously, for me, you are the definitive Mickey, and you always will be.
Well, that's very nice, but really, you should see Sean Jones. He was astonishing.
Well,
really
I'm sure, but you've got such an impression. I've seen quite a few Mickeys. They've all been very good. Whoever's not there, please unmute. Mute up, please. Thank you. No, honestly, it really kind of. I'm not sure for a lot of people, you're always somebody that you remember, and you're the one, and you'll always be. So I can't change that. Sorry.
The check's in the post, John.
Okay, so let's move a little bit further on very quickly. In one of my favorite films, you took on the role of Ratso Rizzo in Midnight Cowboy.
No, that was theatre, mate. I did the play of Midnight Cowboy up at Edinburgh. And it was pretty much a complete fucking disaster. So let's move swiftly past.
Fine. Okay, what about The Caretaker?
That was Jamie Lloyd's first big gig as a director.
Right.
And it was myself, David Bradley, and Nigel Harmon were the 3 brothers. I didn't want to do it. To be brutally honest, I didn't want to do it because as a student, I'd always felt quite intimidated by Pinter, and felt like because I didn't go to drama school, there was a secret to Pinter that only drama students got. and Jamie sent me the script, and it was when I was doing Rizzo. There are worse things I could do. Love to play that part. I was playing Ratso in Midnight Cowboy, and Jamie came up to see it, and we went for coffee afterwards, and we were talking about the play, and I said to him, I'll be honest, Jamie, I don't really understand the play. And he looked at me and said, Con, none of us understand the play. We will find it in the rehearsal room. And so that was me absolutely sold on the idea. And I think it's one of the most enjoyable, difficult experiences in my life. I loved working with Dave Bradley and Nigel. I adored being directed by Jamie. And I did it again with Salome a few years later. He's a wonderful director.
Yeah.
And I oddly enough, about a year ago, or maybe a bit more, I was asked to do one of the Pinter benefit nights. And Jamie asked me to do the Aston speech, which is a 8 to 10 page monologue. It takes about 11 minutes.
Right.
And I hadn't done The Caretaker for 10 years, 12 years.
Right.
And Jamie being Jamie gave me like 2 days notice. But Pinter, man, once it's in your head, it never goes away. And within a couple of hours, it
Very
was
true.
back.
Yeah, yeah. So moving on a little bit further up, the Lady Killers. Brilliant.
Yes.
I mean, the film. What was your experience with that? I mean, did you have a good
I
time?
didn't really enjoy it, to be honest. That was one of those situations where it had already been done a couple of years before. It wasn't a takeover. It was meant to be a new production, so to speak. But it wasn't, and we were pretty much restricted to what the other cast had done, and I just can't work that way.
No.
So I never felt particularly free in it or encouraged to fly in it. So it wasn't a particularly happy experience for me. It's a good show, but it wasn't something that I'd ever think about going back and doing again.
Yeah. And then going back to Willie Russell, you played Frank, educating Rita.
Yeah, with Leanne Best. Leanne Best is I think going to win an Oscar one day. Leanne Best is one of these extraordinary actresses who just walks into a room and doesn't just light up a room, she fucking explodes a room.
Yeah.
And when Willie asked me to do it, I said, I'm too young to play Frank. And I said that to the director and I said it to the producers. And I was so fucked off that none of them agreed with me. And I didn't really want to do it because I'd seen the film and I'd seen the play and I loved it, but I wasn't, it always felt to me like it was Rita's story entirely. And then Willie said to me, have you read the play? And I hadn't. And I should have, because he's that good a writer. And when I read the play, I realized I'd never seen the play. Although I'd never seen the play.
Because of course it's a two-hander, isn't it?
Well, the play is as much Frank's story as it is Rita's. Gemma directed it, and it was a gorgeous experience. And I loved working with Gemma, and I loved working with Leanne. But the best part for me was Willie came into the rehearsal rooms, which he'd never done for any of the jobs I'd done of his before, and it was such a joy. It was like performing Imagine with John Lennon in the room. It was terrifying and exquisite in equal measures, and I loved playing. And we played it in Liverpool, which was
which is where it began, didn't it? In Liverpool. Yeah. Okay, so we're now going to move over to some of your film credits. I'm going to start at the beginning with those. A perfect match.
Yeah, move on.
Okay, fine. All right, I tell you what, I'm going to move on to one I'm sure everybody will want to hear about, Dancing Through the Dark.
Dancing through the dark. I was out with my nephew in London about 6 years ago, and a bloke came up to us in TK Maxx, stood in front of me and sang the whole of Dancing Through the Dark song.
You're joking.
No. My nephew was looking at me going, does this happen a lot? Dancing Through the Dark came to me when I was doing Blood Brothers. When I was leaving, I was asked to audition for Me and My Girl, the musical that Mike Ockram was directing, and I went along and I auditioned for it. I didn't get the job, but I really enjoyed meeting Mike. And then Mike came to see Blood Brothers with Willie because they were old friends.
Yeah.
And we had a drink afterwards, and it was very nice and very sweet and very charming. But I didn't think anything of it. And then I think about 2 weeks later, they offered me the lead in this film. And bearing in mind, Willie had just done Shirley Valentine, the movie, and Educating Rita. So, it was a big deal. And it was based on a play I knew well, and it was full of really good young Liverpool actors: Claire Hackett, Mark Womack, Simon. I'm so sorry. Just some beautiful actors, but it was all our first jobs, and I think maybe we all took it, the kids amongst us, because we took it all a bit seriously and didn't really have as much fun with it as we should have done. But I'm very proud of it. I haven't seen it since the premiere,
Right.
And I watched it like that at the premiere, as I always do. But it's had such a lasting effect on my career. I get asked about it a lot,
Yes.
and you know what? I don't mind people shouting. I can tell you a very quick story. I was doing a
Go on.
thing with Jack. I was doing a thing with Derek Jacobi, and we were going back to the hotel. And as we walked through the foyer of the hotel towards the lift, and I'm with Derek Jacobi. Like, one of the reasons I became an actor is because I saw Derek Jacobi on stage. So Derek, and out the corner of my eye, I saw all these balloons in the foyer of the hotel. And as I got closer to the elevator, I realized that the balloons were shaped like penises.
Right.
And then I thought, oh, and then I heard loud Scouse voices, and I thought, oh, it's a hen night.
Yeah.
And then as I started to get to the lift with Sir Derek, I heard, it's him, it's him, it's him. And I thought, oh, fuck. And as the doors opened, we got in. And as the door started to close, this bunch of girls en masse with their penis balloons ran towards the lift screaming, Pizza Mickey! And the doors closed and there was silence. And then Jacobi said to me, were they for you? So, yeah. But I'm very proud of it. It's one of those films I would
Hello,
do.
can I, hi Carl, can I speak to you, babe?
No, you can't, darling. Not
Sorry.
yet.
Hello.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I've got here Cider with Rosie.
Yeah, so it was Rosie, Laurie Lee, but that we made some movie. Juliet Stevenson played the mum. She's brilliant in it. I'm hardly in that film, but it's one of my favourite books. So yeah.
And then we've got we've talked about Telstar, and of course in 2008 you reprised the role as Joe Meek.
Yes. Yeah, you know what? I think that's the only time in my entire career where, when I was approached to do that, it was being financed entirely by one person, a guy called Simon Jordan. And it's the only time in my career where somebody has offered me a job, has said to me what will happen and the date that it will happen on and how much I will get and what they will do and how we will do it. And he stuck to every single word that he gave me. And Telstar could have gone to any number of big leading names. And Simon could have given it to anyone because it was his money, and he could have got much more. Very famous people would have played that part. But because Simon had produced the West End show and he watched the performance night after night after night, he told me, and Nick, obviously, because Nick's my mate, but it was Simon and Nick who said there was no one else that they wanted to play the part. And I will be forever grateful. And I'm so proud of that film. And I'm so proud of my mate, Nick, for writing and directing that as his first film.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was, it was really difficult film for me because doing the play, you had 2 hours a night where you had to become obsessed with this deeply fragmented, tortured man, but also be funny, because it was a funny play.
Yes.
But the film was 10 weeks, and I living with him for 24 hours a day for 10 weeks had a profoundly unsettling effect on me. I was very glad when the film finished, because it was. I think it was the first time in my life where I realized how some people could actually cross over in the job I do and not come back. So yeah, very, very proud of it, but don't want to do it again.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to some relatively, well, say recent ones. I know we can only say so much. Don't Leave Me. Are you able to talk about that one? Yeah.
That's why I've got a beard. Finish.
Yeah.
Don't Leave Me is a thriller directed by a guy called Hadi Ajid, who did a wonderful film called Clean Skin, and another wonderful film called Blue Iguana. And it's a film about a man whose family are killed by a bunch of ne'er-do-wells, and he basically he seeks revenge, but he's not very good at it, and he's a fish out of water, and I've always hated those films where suddenly normal blokes become brilliant kung fu fighters or whatever, martial artists rather, excuse my stupid phrase there, martial artists or brilliant with guns or whatever. I've always found that kind of movies ludicrous, but there's very little dialogue, and this is just a man who cannot release himself from his pain until he gets revenge.
Right.
So we're doing pickups on that next week, which is why I've had to grow the beard again.
Right.
So yes.
Okay. The Last Planet.
The Last Planet is Terrence Malick's new film, which I can tell you all about, but then I would have to kill each one of you individually. So can't do it.
You can't do it. Okay. And of course, there's one which obviously we know that you're in, but we can't really talk about it. And that, of course, is The Batman. Yes.
Yes. But again, I'd have to.
You can't talk about that, but
we could talk a little bit about Chernobyl. I think people would be quite interested.
Yeah, we're going to move on to that very, very soon. I'm going to talk about your TV, a lot of your TV stuff. So I'm going to move very, very swiftly right back to the beginning again. You can tell me to stop mentioning them if you don't want to talk about them.
Okay.
One Summer.
Willie Russell, Dave Morrissey, Ian Hart. Dave Morrissey's first big break.
Yeah.
Ian Hart, Spencer Lee were the three leads. I think I had 3 lines, one of which may have been "fuck off," but may not have been. But I said it a lot. It was directed by the brilliant Gordon Fleming, Jason Fleming's dad. Yeah. It was a 6-part series for Yorkshire. Yeah. It was all our first jobs, and that was the first time I ever worked with Willie Russell. I don't even know if Willie knows I was in it, but yeah. So James Hazeldine was the male lead, and James Hazeldine was the adult lead, and James Hazeldine, God love him, he's not with us anymore, was one of my favourite actors of all time.
Yeah. And then, of course, you were in Brookside.
One episode, and it's
you were in
fucking terrible. I was so bad, I cringe even now. So
okay, let's move on from that then. I'm going to name a few here, and you can talk about them if you want. Pie in the Sky, Casualty.
Richard Griffiths was always a joy to work with. Casualty, we were the last episode before they went pre-Watershed, so we were the last really violent episode. I've just seen Inspector Morse, which we filmed in Australia, and the joy of working with John Thor and Kevin Waitley was beyond comparison. I'd been a John Thor fan. Jack Regan was one of the reasons I wanted to be an actor, the Sweeney. It was just, and I think I've been playing Jack Regan in everything I've done since, really, to be honest. Versions of Jack Regan. Okay.
Okay, Moving Stories, Series 1 and 2.
Yeah, Moving Stories, Jack Rosenthal, comedy about removal men. Warren Clark, Phil Davis, Ronnie Jutti.
Yeah.
Great fun. Second series kind of waned a bit, so probably ended when it should have.
Soldier.
Great episode. I loved it.
Yeah.
Very violent though, and quite an awful human being that I was playing. And I got we filmed in a swimming pool for a whole day, and I got terrible bronchitis.
Oh God.
And was in bed for like a month. Maybe I started. Yeah, no, it was awful. So, but yeah, it was a good episode and a really lovely script.
Peak Practice, Wycliffe.
Yeah, those are my paraplegic years. For some reason I played paraplegic characters like 3 or 4 times. Pie in the Sky, Peak Practice. They were all episodic TV, which I'm very grateful for.
One of my favorite series, Waking the Dead.
Yes, I did with Trevor. Yeah, again, episodic TV. Really high class episodic TV.
And then a connection, obviously, with Inspector Morse. You then appeared as Dr. Robert Massey in Lewis.
With a monkey, and the fucking monkey scratched me. They were filming it outside the room. There's a scene where I show the monkey a toy, and this is absolutely true story. So they're filming it outside the room through the window. So there's just me and the monkey in the room. Just before they turned over, they were going to do a long take, like 15 minutes, and then speed it up in the edit. So I'm sitting there with this monkey,
Yeah.
and the trainer is sitting there with me. And when they turned over, the trainer started to leave. And as she was leaving, she looked at me and she said, "Don't look him in the eye." Well, what the fuck do you do? It's like, don't press the big red button. So I'm sitting there and I'm kind of going. And eventually I look at the monkey and the monkey looks me in the eye and the monkey goes, and goes like this, scratches me. They have to stop production, send me to the hospital. I've got a tiny cut on my arm, but it's bleeding. And I'm sitting in the waiting room, and there's waiting room in the A&E, and there's people with broken limbs and somebody having some kind of breathing attack and people, with road accidents. And I'm sitting there with this tiny scratch. And eventually I get sent into triage, and the nurse goes, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I've been scratched by a monkey."
Oh, you were taking the mickey.
So when they gave me the jab, it was a real in the arm moment. It was real.
It was.
And then I went back and carried on filming with the monkey. That monkey's a bit of a fucker, though, I'll tell you. Evil.
Oh, Lord. Okay, so Wallander, Series 3.
Yes.
Tell us about that in brief.
One of my greatest heroes, Ken Branagh. I would have swept the floor in an episode of Wallander just to work with him, and he didn't disappoint. He's a genuinely magnificent presence, and I think Wallander is one of those characters that very, very, very few people could pull off. Leanne Best, by the way, my Rita is in the new Netflix Young Wallander, just to connect that. But I had a couple of really beautiful scenes with him, and
yes,
it's one of those things where you realize it's your line, but you just too in awe to give a fuck that you tried.
What was the line?
Because you're watching Ken Branagh do his thing. So
yeah.
An honor.
You did. You played Paul. I presume we're talking about Saint Paul. Would it be
in the Bible? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I got thrown off a horse, and that's not happy memories. And we were filmed it in Morocco, and lots of pain.
Yeah,
and the food was shit, and the trailers were shit. But it was a good show.
Yeah. And it was the Bible. You didn't say that. You see, saying that word when you're talking about.
Yeah, you can. The food was really shit, and the trailers were really shit. And when you're in a trailer and there's no air conditioning, and you're in a desert, it's not good. And you've fallen off a horse, and you're peeing blood. It wasn't a good time for me. Oh.
Right, okay, moving swiftly on. I was joking, by the way. Midsummer Murders, another one.
Oh, I took it purely because I got to say the line, "I only want to make cheese." Move on.
Okay, fine. The series Uncle, you played somebody called Val.
Oh, Uncle, okay, Uncle came to me as a straight offer to play transvestite Val, and I'd never played transvestites before, and I had no real understanding of that psyche, and I took it just to have a reason to try and understand that, and I got to know the guy it was based on, who was a transvestite, who's a dad, who's a very interesting man, and a very, very knowledgeable about his own transvestitism, and it became very important to me. And Ollie, who wrote it, was really obliging and collaborative. That Val had a real identity and wasn't just a comedic character because he was a man wearing a dress. And I'm absolutely, Val is one of my favorite characters because he really did grow into something quite special, and I get a lot of response from people on Val. I'm always amazed when I'm recognized as Con from that, because I look so different in Uncle. But people who loved it love Val, and I'm very proud to be associated to Val.
Right. So I'm going to move on now to your portrayal of Cliff Costello in Cucumber and Banana.
The most fun I've ever had with my clothes on or off. For me, one of the greatest living human beings is Russell T Davies.
Mm.
Not only did he change the world with Queer as Folk, but he brought back Doctor Who. I'll tell you a story that not many people know. I read for the lead in Cucumber and got down to a list of 3. And it probably, not getting that role broke my heart more than anything else that I've ever auditioned for and didn't get. So much so that I briefly considered not doing it anymore because I really connected when I read the scripts to that character. And then Russell called me on my phone, obviously, and offered me Cliff. And when I'd read the script initially, I thought Cliff was the part they were asking me to read for, because immediately Cliff just was in my head.
Yeah.
And I hummed and hawed about it for a long time, and then agreed to do it. And again, Russell's one of the few people again who promised me X, Y, and Z when we talked about how Cliff would develop, and Cliff developed exactly as he said, even more so. And just to be involved in anything Russell does, and to be playing a gay character who is so comfortable and confident with himself and with his friends and with his community. I loved doing Cucumber. I thought it was fucking brilliant. I really did.
And Happy Valley 2, as Neil Milton.
Happy Valley. I nearly turned down Happy Valley. It's absolutely true, because I only read the first 2 eps and I thought he was a bit of a wimp, to be honest. And then they sent me a tiny scene that was going to be in a later episode where he talked about alcoholism. And I'm an ex-drunk. I've not had a drink for a long time. But I've obviously seen many ridiculous depictions of alcoholism in film and TV. And she wrote the most beautiful character, and his alcoholism was so beautifully expressed in that scene that I would have killed anyone else if they played that part.
Yeah.
Sally is a profoundly good writer, and Sarah and Siobhan are just 2 of the greatest people and actresses. I would have been happy just to sit in the kitchen and watch them. Again, I would try quite a bit because I was watching them and then suddenly College Online, because they're just so fucking good.
Yes.
And I love good acting. It's the greatest pleasure I have in life, which makes me sound like such a sad ass. But it is.
No, it
watching great actors
Mm.
is such a joy, and those two, and everyone else involved, but those two are just a joy to watch and work with.
I'm now going to move on to something I think everybody wants to hear about. Again, if I've missed something out, pull me up on it, and that is, of course, Chernobyl.
Yeah. Chernobyl Chernobyl came to me at a very difficult time in my life. And professionally, I just left an agent, and I was quite bruised by it. And the audition came in, and Johan, who directs, is quite a formidable character. And prior to that, all the auditions I'd had for about 6 months had been on tape, and I hadn't actually sat in a room with the director for a long time. And I walked in, and there were all the heads of Sister, the company that made it, and HBO and Sky Atlantic, and I knew they'd been looking for some time to try and find this guy. And I'd done my work, but I wasn't feeling very confident. And they asked me to do this speech that he does, this big monologue that he does to a room full of people after the explosion. And so I started it, committed to it, as I always do, because I'm big on, if a director wants me to come back, easy. If he wants me to build up, it's harder. So I went in big, and he stopped me after the first few lines, and he said, no, Conan, it's too big. It's too many people. You've done it like to 100 people. And I said, okay, so how many people? He said, 34. So I went, oh, okay. So I pulled it back and did it, and he stopped me again. He said, no, bring down 12 people. So we did it to 12, and then he stopped me again. And he went, 9. And I thought, right, you're taking the piss now. But we kept doing it. And I don't know Jan that very well, but I feel that he saw something in me, but he knew my confidence was low. So he was building me up. So by the time we got to -3 people, I was fucking flying, and that was one of the quickest jobs I'd been offered. I was offered it like 2 days later, which for such a big show is quite. But then we got on the floor and we went to Lithuania to film it. The perm was a stupid thing I said because I was filming something else at the early stages. The picture was, I went in for a costume and makeup, and there was a picture of Victor, and he had curly hair. And I just said, why don't we perm my hair? And they hadn't even mentioned it. And suddenly Daniel, who was doing the makeup, went, ding, and he went, yes! And I said, but we can't perm it properly because I'm doing another job. And so an hour and a half every morning it took to do that perm. And every morning I would wake up and I would look like Cruella de Vil. My hair would just be like fucking like Leo Sayer in Big Brother. It was like, wow. And obviously with that hair, I didn't get laid the entire time we were filming the show. But I think, I will say without a shadow of a doubt, the cast of Chernobyl is unlike any TV cast I've worked with, in as much as there's a lot of theatre people in that production. And we instinctively worked together so beautifully and with such very little ego in the room. And every scene we were doing, we inherently knew about what the scene was about. And that's what we were playing, the narrative of the scene. And nobody was grandstanding and nobody was going, this is my Emmy moment. Everyone was just, and that comes from Johan and Craig Mazin, who wrote it. This absolute dedication to getting it right rather than demonstrating. It was about getting it right. And, it's a really, really tragic, frightening story.
Isn't it?
That our whole nation was being lied to by a government. And suddenly we're there again. No, the whole nation was being lied to by a government. And so it wasn't about us, the actors. It was about telling that story. And I honestly believe that's why it did so well. It's because, that's what we did. We told the story.
Absolutely, and that's what we are. We're storytellers. No
Yeah, exactly. But we miss that. We lose that quite a lot, though, John. Actors and directors. Sometimes I'm offered a job with a director who's known for, opinions and smoke and mirrors, and I don't want to do a play if the director's vision has got nothing to do with the text. I don't want to. That's not telling the story that's written. That's letting somebody have a wank. It's not what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'm never going to work again after this goes out.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So we've got Wild Bill. Now, I thought that was brilliant, that series, and you played somebody called Ray Gilchrist.
Yeah, Rob Lowe. Do you know what? We're the same age, and I walked on set, and obviously we've all people of my age grow up with Rob Lowe as this Hollywood heartthrob, and I walked on set, and I looked like his dad. Not only do I look like his dad, but I look like his dad who's eaten only Greggs for the past 20 years. He's so just fucking incredibly handsome. And, it wasn't an easy shoot. We were in the middle of nowhere and it was cold and we lost a couple of days because we had bad weather. So we're having to reshoot scenes that they couldn't cut together, and that's all. Pardon me, that's always quite difficult. But okay, I'm in a scene with Rob Lowe.
Absolutely, there you go. And so a few people have mentioned this to me, and that is Cobra.
Cobra, yeah.
Yes.
Again, they asked me to do it. I'd auditioned for a different part that I really wanted, but I didn't get it. they offered me the smaller role, which I wasn't that interested in doing. But then, oh,
Yeah.
hello, that's not good. Sorry, I'm coming back. Don't worry.
No worries.
Am I back? Yeah, they offered me a different role, but I didn't know at that time that Rob Carlyle was doing it. And when I found Rob was doing it, I jumped at the chance because,
Absolutely.
you know, there's some actors that you watch that you go, not only do I want to work with them, but I think we could do something interesting. The
Yeah.
energies are interesting together.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's a pretty ferocious actor, but such a nice bloke. And I really enjoyed doing it.
Great.
Yeah.
And Ladhood playing Mr. Stones.
Ladhood, yeah, that came out of the blue. That was written by a guy, Liam, who I did a comedy pilot with years ago that never got made as a series. And I was just about to go and film something else, and I think it might be Don't Leave Me, the initial filming of Don't Leave Me. So I had the beard for that. And then this came in, which I just thought was really funny. And I used to have two teachers at my school, Mr. Grimshaw and Mr. Brown, and I've absolutely based him on both of them in equal measures. And yes, he did exist, and that wasn't that far from the truth. My truth of the teachers I had in my school.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that's that. Honestly, I mean, this is just amazing. And so, have you got anything else lined up that's coming up that you're able to talk about or not?
Not really, because we're still filming the one I'm not allowed to talk to you about.
Okay.
And with COVID and everything, that's probably going to take some time. But the trailer looks awesome.
Yeah.
And so those films do take a long time.
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of people on here that I'm sure are itching to jump on and ask their favorite question or whatever they want to say. So
do it, baby.
Do is ask anybody now, if you would like to ask a question, if you can put your little emoji hand up, and I'll bring you on, and we'll get through as many as we possibly can. We've actually got another half an hour, so feel free to stick your hand up. I can see lots of hands going up. So we're going to go to Matt Duran. So when you've asked your question, Matt, if you can then, you've taken it down. I'm brilliant. Good lad. Over to Con.
Hey Con, thanks for doing this, by the way, and nice to meet you. I've found it really interesting the way you've been talking about Willie Russell's writing. Some people say that it's he's still underrated, even though lots of people know his work. But he connects you with the characters so much that even so, without giving it away, like the start of Blood Brothers, you know what's coming, but it still gets to you because the writing is so good. And I've noticed this again with things like Shirley Valentine. Saw that with Nicky Swift, and I wanted to ask that even when you came to Northampton, One for the Road in 2013, just how that came about. If that was
okay. It was a very quick story. I was up for a big telly job and didn't get it, and was so fucked off. And literally, as I got the phone call about not getting it, Laurie Sanson, who's the director, emailed me with the offer for One for the Road. And I'd seen One for the Road a million years ago. And I thought, when Laurie sent it to me, thought it was going to be really dated. But when I reread it, like most of Willie's work, it's got layer after layer after layer after layer. And I've never done a play in my life before with that amount of laughter from an audience. It's poignant, it's moving as well. But everyone says Willie writes great roles for women, which he does, but he also writes fucking brilliant roles for blokes. Brilliant. He was a great character. So that's how that came about.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Cheers, thanks.
Thank you
So
very
if we
much.
were actually at the same time, we were working at that theatre at the same time. I was rehearsing Spring Awakening when you guys were rehearsing that, so we were in the same theatre.
Were you doing Spring Awakening, the musical, or the play?
The musical, we were the theatre, we were doing that at the same time.
Show. I love that show.
I was
think it's What were you?
Moritz, so the suicide scene where you were talking about how that line crossing between actors and it can really mess you up. Yeah, Crash Course at 16. Great, happy days.
Yeah. I did Spring Awakening, but the play when I was 16.
Oh, fantastic.
It's a fucking good play, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, whoa, though, wacky. Okay, thanks, Matt.
Thanks very
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Sarita Eames, if you'd like to unmute yourself and fire away with your question for Con. Sarita Eames, have we got Sarita in the room?
Got me. Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Sarita, if you'd like to unmute yourself and you can ask your question to Con.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Hello.
Hi, Sarita. Beautiful
Hello.
name.
Thank you very much. I would just like to ask, I came into the Zoom a little bit late, so you might have already spoken about this, but you took on the role of Kenneth Halliwell in Prick Up Your Ears.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it yet.
You did talk about it?
No, we haven't.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. Well, that was the first time I actually, I'm going to turn my kitchen light off because it's really bright. Oh, that's a bit better. Like in the hallway. Sorry. It was the first I saw you in theatre. I had seen you on random things in TV, but I apologise, I didn't actually know. But you talked earlier about I was a little bit younger. You talked about people sobbing in the audience.
Yeah.
After your performance in Prick Up Your Ears, and obviously we booked it. We didn't book it for Matt Lucas. We booked it for Joe Orton.
Yeah.
We had to be removed by the ushers because my partner and I, we were sobbing.
Yeah.
I've never seen. I mean, I'm an actor, and I've, not of your caliber, but I've seen so much theatre, and obviously until recently, but I've never seen something that's stuck me in my seat so much. And I would just like to thank you for that. And,
thank you.
Also, very quick question: how do you do that? How do you take over in a role like that when something so dramatic also happens?
I wish I hadn't done it, to be honest, because for those of you who don't know, Prick Up Your Ears is a story about Joe Orton and his lover Kenneth Halliwell, and Matt Lucas was playing Kenneth Halliwell in the West End, and then Matt's partner died tragically, and Matt had to leave the show. So I stepped in, and I stepped in with like only 8 days rehearsal with an 86-page script, three-hander, and I did what I don't like to do, which is I literally just focused on what I had to do rather than bringing in all the other factors. I believe I'm a generous actor. I like to be a generous actor, but because of the time restraint, I had to just bulldoze, and I only did it for about 6 weeks. I don't know when you saw it. Towards the end of that 6-week run, we had this amazing show. But for the first couple of the weeks, I was just bulldozing because I didn't really have a choice. The director wasn't available. So I was just instinctually playing Ken. And having played Joe Meek before, they had a similar story. And they had a similar kind of reclusiveness and self-loathing. So I could channel into that. And, he'd written a great script, and Chris knew as Joe. Chris is a fucking good actor, and I would have loved to have done Prick Up Your Ears in the proper way. Sorry?
Well, we saw it in the first week of when you took over.
I was bulldozing.
Your mind still bulldozing. To us as an audience, it broke our hearts. And I can only honestly say, as a performer, if something like that had happened on stage, I need another actor who is playing the lead to actually kind of bulldoze, because you don't have the time, because you're going on stage the next day. And then by the end of, yes, lovely, but your other co-actors would, and stage managers and everyone would probably really appreciate the fact that you did it how you did it.
Possibly, but with all due respect, by the end of the run, we had a nuanced production, and there's something about grandstanding, which is what I was doing. Thank you for your compliment, but I know myself as an actor, and the only way I could get through the first few performances was to just instinctually hammer it. And that's kind of, you know, when you do your first run in a rehearsal room, those first performances were my first run. Nuance out the window, just pure emotion. And that isn't the sort of acting I appreciate as an audience member.
No, of course not. But you were in the most bizarre of circumstances and the weirdest of situations.
But I would love to have done the play, and we'll move on because there's other people, but I would have loved to have done that play with a director and 5 weeks rehearsal.
Yeah.
That would have been, I would have loved to have honoured. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Did. You absolutely did, as someone who couldn't get out of their seat. So thank you. Next person.
Very much. Okay, right. Luke Fletcher, please. You have Luke. Hello, Luke. Hello, Luke.
Hi, Con.
Hi, Luke.
Hi. I just wanted to say, over lockdown, you have been like the most inspirational actor I've ever come across. And I've got a two-part question for you.
Okay, I can't see you. Is your camera on?
Oh, no, it isn't. Could you switch your camera on, please, Luke?
Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go. Hiya, Luke.
Hi. So I'd like to ask, what is the best advice you could give for someone that would like to play Mickey in Blood Brothers?
Okay. How old are you, Luke?
15.
Okay. Mickey, the thing about Mickey that I've learned, and some of the people I've seen play Mickey has learned, but most haven't, he's not a victim. Never play Mickey as a victim. Mickey is the light in the room. From the beginning, from the minute he walks on stage as a 7-year-old boy, he explodes. Him and Eddie are from the same womb, and they are both full of light, love, and hope. What happens to Mickey is circumstance. Don't allow the circumstance to colour how you play the young boy and the young man. So I would say, be aware that he's not tragic until the tragedy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So use your energy, use your positivity to play Mickey, and then indulge the negativity towards the very end of the play. Don't let it become a factor throughout. It's not.
Do you mean like show how
Well,
he's getting through, show like slowly him going through the depression and going into the drugs and all that?
Do you know, trust the script. The thing is, Mickey's happy being poor because he's happy with his family and he's happy with his friends. So don't play the victimhood when he's a kid. Don't play the victimhood when he's 14. Don't play the victimhood when he's
it's not like
in
that
his 20s. Just allow play the truth of the play. Don't preempt the ending. It works wonders if you do that. It really does. He's a bright light. Don't extinguish him too soon. So what's the second part?
I wanted to ask, what was it like working with the late great Robert Locke?
Joyful. I miss him. You know, he was my first proper leading man. Robert had a lot of experience in theatre I hadn't. He told me off all the time. We used to share a dressing room, which we did from day one. And my half of the dressing room was just like a bomb had gone off. And his half was like this pristine showroom. But he taught me how to be generous as an actor. And I miss him very much.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you.
Okay, mate. Thank you.
Okay. Duncan Hess, if you'd like to unmute yourself, please, Duncan.
Con, hello.
Hello, mate.
A quick one about Telstar.
Okay.
I don't know if you knew in the theatre, once you went off stage, the audience just sat there in stunned silence and walked out and sat on the pavement in stunned silence because of the state you were in and what a fantastic show it was. And my son and I went for a drink in a pub opposite, and we were genuinely concerned. We just said, how does he recover from that? This was a matinee. How does he pick it up? Because you had to be picked up off the floor, didn't you, for the curtain call?
Yeah.
The two actors came on, brought it, and you took you back. And we sat there in this pub, just in awe of what you'd done. And thank God you walked past the window, smiling with a cup of coffee. So we knew you'd recovered.
Coffee is a clue.
How quickly and how do you get over that? You walk off stage in that state.
Yeah.
I mean, and then.
Do you know what you when I was a young actor, when I was starting out, and alcohol fueled this. I used to think my job was to live in the darkness of the character and indulge that, but it isn't. My job as an actor is to find a way in, find how to make that work so I can repeat it, and then do that. And with Telstar, because I was playing somebody who really existed, the pain was different. The emotion was connected to something else. So Telstar was quite difficult, certainly the film. But it's my job. And I've worked with actors who indulge that kind of, and it doesn't work. It's my job. It's my job to get to the end of the play, to give you what you paid for, and then to go and get a coffee, have a sleep, and go and do it again. That's my job. I've been doing it a long time. I don't indulge the idea that I take my work home with me. If I took my work home with me, my partner would beat the shit out of me. That's not my job. My job is to finish at the curtain call. Sometimes my curtain call might be a little bit, it might bleed through into the curtain call. But by the time I'm in my dressing room, certainly by the time I'm in my own clothes, it's in the drawer.
Sensational. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, Esther Johnson. Esther.
Hi. So
hello.
I have two questions.
Okay.
First off, how would you suggest to like best prepare for your roles, like off stage or like off screen?
You mean before we start filming or before rehearsals, or?
So like when you get a script, what work do you do like for?
Okay. I read the script a lot. If I'm auditioning, this is the advice I give to young actors all the time. If I have time, because quite often you get a script the night before and it's 20 pages, but if I can, I learn it inside out, back to front. I believe absolutely categorically that you cannot fly if you don't know your script inside and out. I've believed that for most of my career. My early career, it was kind of the status quo, to paraphrase. It's bollocks. If you're doing a job because you like the script, honor the script, learn the script. So I read it and I read it and I read it and I read it and I read it. If it's a real life thing so that I can do some research, I'll do the research. I'm a great believer in 95% of what you learn will never get shown, will never be seen. It's all subtext. But the way you get good at your job is know your subtext. Be the most prepared person in the room, always. And if you can't be the second most prepared person in the room. So that's what I suggest.
Awesome. And my second question was, what advice would you give to young actors other than going to drama school?
Okay. Grow a thick skin. You're going to get rejected every single day of your life. I am, and I've been doing it for 30 odd years. Go to the theatre. Real acting, real great acting that will stay with you forever is rarely on film. You will see performances live on stage that will blow your fucking mind. The reason it will blow your mind is because it's happening in the moment. And I believe, as an actor, that theatre is about live, being alive. And so I will change intonations all the time. Sometimes it really fucks off the other actors, and the directors hate it. But if something occurs to me in the moment, I'm not going to change the blocking, but I will constantly allow the moment to govern what I'm doing intellectually and spiritually, inherently. Grow a thick skin. Read everything. Everything you can, read it. Grow a thick skin. Nick things. If you see an do something that you really like. Work out how they do it, nick it, grow a thick skin. Don't compare and despair. If you compare and despair, if you think that she's doing that, she's doing that, she's doing that, you're never going to be happy. Work your own path, grow thick skin, and just grow thick skin.
Thank you so much.
Okay, no worries. John, are you dead? John? Hello?
Christopher Buckingham, sorry about that.
Well, so first off, can I just say thank you for being so honest about rejections? Because because some Zoom calls we do with actors, they're just like it's just they're talking from success to success to success. But to hear somebody in the industry say, I've had it rough, is really helpful to hear as a coming up actor. I mostly do scare acting at the moment, but yeah, thank you for that. And then question with Chernobyl, to say, because what the main thing, how did you find when you were researching it? How did you, I don't know, get your character down? Okay,
the thing about, I spent quite a bit of time with Paul and because we were the threesome that was in the show, and you know you're kind of playing the villains of the piece, and it's quite difficult when you're playing the villains to make them full-blooded and rounded and human. And we all did a lot of reading, and what came out in our chat was in the West, if you don't achieve what you're meant to achieve in your job, you might get fired, you might get demoted. Over there at this point, you lose everything. Like your social status isn't just your friends, it's you get taken out where you live. You don't get the same kind of lifestyle. You get demoted massively. So whereas you don't condone him, you have to understand why he did it. And that there's a human aspect to what he did that you have to embrace. Otherwise, you're just playing a girl. And girls aren't interesting. You know, I watch a lot of horror films. My mum and me, when I was a kid, my dad used to work away a lot, so my mum would let me watch horror films. Great parenting, because I couldn't sleep very well. I wonder if that was why. But so I'm a big horror fan. And what I've noticed over the last 20 or so years of horror is we're churning out horror film after horror film after horror film, but there's nobody you give a flying fuck about.
Yeah.
And then the quiet one comes along, and suddenly there's a real center there that you emote, that drags you in, that pulls you in, because you don't want her to be hurt. You don't want the kids to. You don't want him to. And I'm not saying that we did that with Chernobyl. What I'm saying is you've got to find the humanity in it. And if you're playing a ghoul, find the humanity in it. If not, you're just a ghoul. And I've no interest in playing just a ghoul. It bores me.
So that's what you did. So because I said before watching it, I'm someone that did a lot of research on it, because before I got into the performing arts, I studied history and nuclear physics.
Wow.
And of course I did Russian history. So it's an area of history I'm very interested in. So it was really impressive to watch how that was pulled off.
Thank you. You know what? As much as I like wearing that cap, it's nearly
it was a whole team map. It was a whole.
It's Craig and Johan, and you know I've never seen so many people hand stitching costumes in my life. And you know the material they used was authentic material. Every single department was absolutely on top of their game. So I'm really glad you appreciated it. But we walked into a world that they created for us, so they made it a lot easier.
Thank you.
Good luck, mate.
Thanks, Christopher. Ellen Owen, please. You'd like to unmute yourself, please, darling. You. Yeah, you need to unmute yourself, please. Sorry about the delay here. Yeah, there we are.
There we go. Is that working?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Hello. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah. I just wanted to say, first off, I'm really glad that you did do The Caretaker, because that was the first play I saw you in, with Nigel, and met you both there and educating Rita. So yeah, my question was, in terms of theatre, what would you say is your dream theatre role that you feel that maybe you haven't achieved yet, but you would like to?
Oh, what a good question. You know, I did View from a Bridge, the Arthur Miller play at the Exchange in Manchester a few years ago, and Sarah Frankham, who directed it, asked me 2 years ago to do Death of a Salesman, to play Willie Loman, and I turned it down because I desperately wanted to do it, but Willie Loman is 63 in the text, and I couldn't get past the age difference in my head, and so I just felt that I would be doing old man acting, and the play is so magnificent that you can't do old man acting. You've got to absolutely inhabit that character, and so I would love to play Willie Loman one day in Death of a Salesman when I'm old enough. I would love to play Richard III. I've never really done Shakespeare. I did Macbeth on the telly, but I haven't done any Shakespeare, and I would love to do Richard III and Shylock. Ta-da!
Thank you very much, Ellen. Diane, if you'd like to unmute, please. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello there,
Diane.
Hello, Mr. O'Neill. How are you?
I'm well, baby. How are you?
Not so bad, thanks. Oh, it's great. This is fantastic. But we've had the swearing, but no nudity yet.
I'm not wearing anything underneath.
Oh, that's enough. That's enough. Thank you. I was wondering, Con, for the big scenes, like thinking of the one in Happy Valley, the big scene outside the pub, was it? And again, going back to Telstar, the big scenes in that. How do you psych yourself up for the really big scenes?
I like to rehearse them on the floor. If you're talking about filming, I like, because in theatre you have the narrative in the theatre, so you get there because the narrative takes you there. In film, because you film everything out of sync, I like to rehearse it, and then they set up the cameras and the lights. I go away to my room or my caravan or whatever, and I don't know how some actors can be chatty Cathy before a take and then switch it on. It doesn't work for me. So I get quite insular, and yeah, I don't really know what my process is, and other than not socializing. I don't.
It's a natural thing, obviously, isn't it?
Well, if it's well written, you'll get there. Tom Cruise, who's a movie star, I mean, he's a great movie star. Whether or not he's a great actor, I don't know. But he did say once something that I absolutely. He's taller. He did say something once I absolutely agree with, and that is, if the writer has written you are crying in a scene, and when you play the scene, you're not crying, whatever you're feeling is the right thing.
Okay.
So if I have this idea in my head to play a scene in a certain way, and when we come to shoot it, I'm not there, wherever I am is the right place.
Okay.
So that's what I play. And with the scene with the scene you're talking about, the drunk scene.
Brilliant scene.
It was actually really quite easy to do because there's a lot of demonstrating in it.
Right.
And demonstrating is kind of the easiest part of the acting world. The harder scenes is when you're listening.
Okay. Yeah.
And harder scenes are when you're showing something about your character that he doesn't want you to see. They're
Okay.
the harder scenes.
Okay.
And when you're working with, when you've got Sarah Lancashire sitting on top of you, shouting at you, you know, the fear's real. So, you know.
Oh, it's just
yeah.
fantastic. And thank you for, you give everything in your work, and I just love it so much, you know. So
Thank you.
and thank you for being such a lovely guy.
Oh, shut up.
Thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Okay, well,
Okay.
time is catching up, so we've time for 2 more quick questions. So we're going to go to Ram. If you'd like to unmute yourself, please, Ram. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you, John. How you doing, brother?
Dude, what a voice.
How you doing, Con? Doing
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Right, thank you very much. My question goes as follows. I've been interested about this TV series you've been, so the question was mingling in my mind a bit. I was thinking, well, when you get to play in based on a true story or storytelling movie, what kind of advice would you give to us regarding where to start when it comes to researching? What category or field of research we should look out for that could benefit us in perfecting our role?
Good question, man. What I do if I'm playing somebody who exists or existed is I try not to have preconceived ideas when I'm doing the research. So I will Google, I will check out the books, I will see if there's any footage. I did a film called Margot about Margot Fontaine, and I played her husband, Tito Andreas. And there's very, very little information about Tito, very little information, and most of it is contradictory. So it didn't help in that case. But I will try not to make my choices until I've done the research. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
So I've read the script. I'm attracted to the character. They've asked me to play it.
Mm.
If I've auditioned, I've already made some choices in the audition. But then if they offer it, I shelve everything and then I read. And I read about him and I read about his life. And then when I feel I've read enough to give me some kind of footing,
right,
then I'll look at the script again.
Oh.
And I'll start to inform my choices with information about him that I didn't have at the audition stage.
So you have a wide perspective of what you could feel or have emotional feelings, right?
And also you might find something about him that you didn't know.
Right.
You know, and it's all fuel. Whether you choose to use it or not is up to you.
Right.
But it's all fuel, and sometimes there's a piece of information gets you out of all types of shit in a scene that you can't work out. You know, you might find a nugget there that's going to help you. But most 90% of your research you won't use. But it gives you nuance and it gives you detail, and those are the things that make you stand out. Do you sing, by the way?
Well, if I train for it, I could possibly, yeah.
Dude, I think your voice is just astonishing. Wow. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ram. Okay, and finally, I'm really sorry this is going to have to be the last question. Trevor Cridland, please.
Hi there, Con.
Hi, Trevor.
How you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Listen, I've been a fan of yours since Blood Brothers, and followed your career ever since, and best performance I've ever seen, clearly.
Thank you.
Question. So, we live in strange times. There will be a play written at some time about the current government. Who would you play, which minister, and why?
Fuck.
I've got you down as Gavin Williamson.
No, he's desperately dull. A would have to be a comedy.
Yeah.
Because they are all fucking clowns. A farce. Do you know what? I'd have a stab at Boris.
Really?
Yeah, if I was going to play one of those arseholes, I would like to play the biggest arsehole. Cummings is too much of a... there's so little information on Cummings, and I feel I would end up playing the villain with him, which I'm not interested in doing. But Boris, there's enough there about Boris to know why Boris and how Boris ticks. So yeah, if this does not mean I validate Boris in any way, but if I was going to play one of the cabinet, he would be the one that I would, and also I'd be able to eat what I want.
Would you look at it as a play or a musical?
What, the cabinet as a play or a musical?
Would it be a musical? I mean, could you imagine Boris walking on singing?
No, do you know what? I think if it was a musical, we would let them off the hook. And I don't think that should happen. So I think it should be a play or a film. And, you know, there's got to be some light in it somewhere. And we'll see where the light is eventually. It's very hard to see at the moment.
It won't be when Boris is bending over.
There's an image.
Thanks very much, Trevor.
I have to say,
Thank you.
Voice. Anyway, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, I'm really, really sorry. We're going to have to end now. But remember, you can stay back in a couple of minutes. But what I would like you all to do, if you would, is to unmute yourselves and join me in giving Con a big round of applause. And thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Before we do go, I'm going to really embarrass somebody. Nobody on here. My partner has been very, very kind in behind the scenes, just making sure that everything is run as smoothly as possible. And I'm going to get him to pop his head to the screen, and I want you to give him a big round of applause. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. And once again, thank you to Con. I mean, it's just
everyone.
Thank you.
You're a big inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Con. Thanks, John. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone. It's been a
Con.
pleasure.
Yes.
Love you.